Hi everyone, this is Dr. Liz, and you're listening to Include with Dr. Liz. This show is about everyone, all people, including you. It's about people and their diverse lived experience in this world. I chat with guests to get to know them, their identities, and their inclusion needs, so we all have an opportunity to understand how best to include them, so together we can create a world where everyone thrives. Jyl is a weekend volunteering, basketball playing, witty, rule breaking, inspiring, caring and forgiving disruptor. An executive in diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, Jyl's driving purpose is serving as a voice for the voiceless, with the goal of positively influencing the future of DEI. Welcome, Jyl.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Liz. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, we probably should tell people that we know each other, so it'll be interesting to see how this conversation goes today. It's just like not some stranger having a conversation. So I'm really looking forward to it. But before we dive into things, I want to ask, what is it that you do when you're volunteering on the weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love volunteering alongside my sorority. And we do everything from food banks to different art projects, learning seminars for the youth. I mean, you name it, we show up. And I love the variety, right, of being able to make an impact across all identities and people from all backgrounds.
So, as an Australian, we don't have sororities. So how long has it been since you've been in college? So I imagine it's been a while since you were in a sorority, so to speak.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. So I'm a part of what they call a Black Greek letter organization.
Mhm.
And though they were originated at the undergraduate level within our higher eds, our commitment is a lifetime. So after you graduate, we have graduate chapters in the major cities. So you join a graduate chapter and you continue throughout your life serving with the organization. So the structure is a little bit different and designed to make sure that the commitment level
Yeah.
remains the same as we want to make a legacy and social impact, especially in the US, but
Yeah.
be
I love that. It keeps you connected to those people as well. Now, it also raises to mind. So you said it was a Black Greek letter. So am I assuming correctly that all sorority sisters are Black?
Not all, not
Okay.
all. So it is very much an inclusive organization. You'll find women who identify from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, you name it. But the founding principles were built on focusing at, on the Black experience, the Black collegiate experience.
Yeah.
A lot of them were formed during the early 1900s when you had things such as like civil rights movement, what the women's suffrage movement
Yeah.
happening, right? And they were very instrumental in driving policies and outcomes for equity for all people, but with a focus on the Black experience in the United States.
And I even just then I start to extrapolate the impact to the individual, right? So I can't help but wonder. I bet you that that helps with graduation rates, just belonging to something more smaller, so it's more
Mhm.
intimate but meaningful. That means that you probably have that support network, which means you're more likely to pass and to be retained and get through graduation. Because dropout
Absolutely.
rates are so high. I think that's something that we're missing here. Oh, not here. I'm in the US now, but missing in the Australian system.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. And I think, as we kind of examine the blueprint for Black Greek letter organizations in North America and the connectedness of those members, because we do see that translate into, crazy high numbers for your graduation rates, right? And you
Mhm.
start to see those members move on to, really influential roles, public policies, the corporate place, right? And there's this continued sense of belonging, right? Across your entire, lifespan, right? But if we actually take that and translate it into what we see in the workplace today, there are similarities, right? So if we talk about, our everyday employee resource groups,
Yep.
right? Or our inclusion and belonging council, we start to see some of those same behaviors, that connectedness, the willing to network,
Mm.
leverage practices, help folks work through challenges, whether it's a business challenge or personal experience challenge in the workplace. And we do see them having a stronger sense of belonging. And that directly ties to engagement,
Re-
productivity, and output of our
Retention.
activities.
Yes.
Right. Right. So there is definitely that mirror
Yeah.
of bringing that concept in the workplace, which you and I both know,
Yeah.
and strongly champion in our work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess it's a natural segue to ask, well, we said it in the introduction that you are a diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging professional. So, what led you to focus your career on
Yeah.
driving equitable outcomes?
I think the long story short is, I started in corporate America in the insurance industry here in the US. I was setting out to, do this really amazing corporate, career. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to, get promoted. I wanted to drive business impact. And as I started to experience the workplace, Dr. Liz, I heavily noted that I often was the only one in the room.
Mm.
I was the only person identifying, as a woman. I am neurodivergent in so many different ways. I have ADHD, dyslexia, you name it, been there, done it. I am a military spouse. I'm a parent. It's just so many of these things. And obviously I'm a woman of color. But it was so many things that in that environment that told me that I was different. And it forced me to mask who I was, right? I brought a representative to work.
Mm.
And in essence, that threatened my psychological safety. I learned how to assimilate, give, corporate type responses that I knew would be accepted by the dominant group in the room, and just kept my head down as a means to be promoted and continue to achieve different financial levels so that I can simply support my family. That's
Mm.
what I'm thinking. But one day, I just looked up and I said, I'm tired. It's exhausting masking who you are, your experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I made a decision one day. I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to bring myself to work
Yep.
in all of its glory.
I remember the day I did that too. It was like on
Yeah,
a day. It wasn't like it happened. Yeah. Carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
empathizing.
No, you feel me. I love this. And it was that moment that unlocked so much for me.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I took a step back and said, wow, because I unlocked myself and
Mm.
allowed me to come to the workplace, it allowed this project to propel in a way or evolve in a way that not only brought the company so much revenue, but created this new sense of global belonging, which you can know builds new products and drive just more kind of consumer ROI. It was great. It was great. And I started to see me as an asset versus a liability.
Yeah.
It was at that time that I said, you know what? I'm a trained operational engineer. That was my title. And I went to one of my mentors in the workplace and I said, I want to go into HR. And they're like, Jill, we invested so much in to be in operations. Like, what do you mean you want to go in HR? And I developed the business case for launching that company's first ever diversity recruiting programs and engagement programs, where I was
Mhm.
educating leaders on differences in the workplace and how that actually supercharges your team's ability to drive outcomes. And I loved it. So I made that pivot in a very interesting way, but haven't looked back. So that
That's
is, I am now committed to doing what I do every day.
I'd never really tapped into until you just said then when you were
Mhm,
talking about that code switching and you made me remember the day. Like I remember where I was sitting when I
mhm,
decided this
mhm.
is it. I'm not
This
doing this anymore.
mhm,
But the impact thing, the way I have just realized I used to go into work and spend my whole day feeling like there was an elephant on my chest.
mhm, mhm,
That's my best description of what it means to not be yourself at work. So if you
mhm,
think about,
mhm,
that's sort of it's obviously a representation of anxiety and not, speaking your truth and a whole bunch of things. the elephant was released. There's no more elephant on the chest because I just turn up as me. And you see what you get what you see. That's it.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. And you know what's really interesting, Dr. Liz? I think we, not always, but I think we as individuals can also hold ourselves back from experiencing inclusion in the workplace. Let's go there.
Okay, let's go there, Jill.
And let's be honest, right? We are all looking at those silent signals in the environment around us.
Mhm.
Looking at the behaviors of our leaders, we're looking at our peers, right? And those things tell us what is acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah.
But we have to recognize that depending on the environment, you may,
Mm.
um, identify that you need to selectively exclude pieces of yourself.
Yeah,
That is not
correct.
a great thing. That's not the end goal.
Mm.
But I want to be real, depending
Yes.
on the temperature of, the environment. And that's where we really push employees, or I do just as a practitioner, to join ERGs, to drive the change, the
Yeah.
environmental system, the processes that may keep some of those barriers in place so they can find a voice to help break it apart in a way that's psychologically safe to them.
Yeah.
But again, the goal is inclusion and belonging for all.
Agreed. And here's the thing, there's it dependent on the temp when you're saying the temperature of the space that you're in, but also the risk that there is to you. So, you know, I was in a privileged position to go, well, if this doesn't work, I'll just go get another job. But not everyone else is always in that same situation. So that's
Sure.
where and why it circles back to I actually don't think the onus for creating inclusion for oneself is on the individual that needs to be included. It's on everybody else to create that environment so it feels and looks safe to be that person. So there's no question that there is no risk. Um,
Yeah.
okay, but anyway, that's summarizing that. I
I
really
love
want.
it. I love it. But Dr. Liz, I think there's another point to that, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been doing this work for 18 years. And I have to acknowledge that for leaders who are really excited and open, to driving and being a part of this inclusion journey, sometimes they don't know what they don't
Mm,
know, right? So yes, the onus is on the infrastructure, to create inclusion for us, but if they don't know us and
mhm.
what we need, it sometimes there's a gap.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where your DI practitioners, they come in and help create
Yeah.
those bridges,
Bridget.
right? Yeah, to help with the experience. But we just also have to acknowledge that we have to create equity for those in power and privilege to understand what the needs are so they
Yeah.
can help, remove barriers and drive different behaviors that then will give, people signals that they're okay
Mm.
being who they are in the
And I
workplace.
think if you're listening, I think on reflection for me, I'm thinking, what would I take from this? Right? How can I take this and evaluate how I'm currently doing things to do it better? Just review how are you approaching the change of being more inclusive and creating those equitable outcomes. Double check that you're not just equipping those that are an underrepresented identity in your workplace to better navigate themselves within an environment that doesn't include them.
Mhm.
Flip the coin. How are you equipping those of the majority to make better decisions and equitable pathways for people that are the underrepresented, right? The work and effort needs to flip the coin and focus on who needs to create the change so people don't have to make it their job and just do
Mhm.
their job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
An
anyway, that's
example
just,
of that. Well, I love it. And to the viewers that are watching, like an example of that is like the quickest way that you can start is embedding it in your everyday process,
mm,
right? The people process. That's the first step. An example of that is, let's say, you have an executive that is hiring, right, for a new open role. Well, there's one point in the process where that executive can receive a checklist. Once they have generated their candidate, pipeline, they've selected the folks for maybe the interview screen. Then an audit or a checklist pops up and says, hey, leader, before you move forward or start, double check this candidate slate. Do
mm,
you have equal representation of this? And we shouldn't exclude, right? Often in the US, there's a focus around, just white men being a part of the discussion, but also being a part of the process. Like
Mhm.
we have equal amount of, those who identify as white heterosexual males. And then,
Yep.
you can move to LGBTQ, like whatever those identifiers are in your company, like make people take a second to
Yeah.
just ask themselves the question. That drives different behaviors,
Yeah.
right? Alone versus me as the chief diversity officer saying, all right, now look at the data and, pointing the
Yes.
fingers, like give people the enablement that guides them
Mm.
through the process so they can just think about it. So it's awareness.
Yes.
And then they click a button. Yes.
Ah,
I made sure I had a diverse slate. And then you
yes.
move on.
So you literally stole the word out of my mouth. The way I describe it in just from a behavioral science point of view is that if you want to impact a change in behaviors is actually not about necessarily starting with the behavior change. In fact, as a behavioral scientist, it hurts my feelings that that's actually not the solution. You have to put the architecture in place. So that button that they have to press, like you can't pass go
Mhm.
until you do this thing inclusively. And in your case, you've done a pop up. They have to review it. They have to tick it, sign it that they've approved that they've done that, and click literally in this example, click a button.
Yeah.
And the more you have to repeat an action,
Mhm.
the it starts to become a habit. And then habits become behaviors, and behaviors form culture. So I think that's a perfect example. Think about what are the steps to achieve the outcome and
Mhm.
put the architecture in place that forces the action. So, can I ask you, Jill, do you A, believe DEI is dead? Why are people saying that? And how does that impact you, me, and everyone else on this planet?
Yeah, such a relevant, timely, and meaningful question for so many of us out there. And, to answer your question, no, DEI is not dead. It can't possibly be. Why? Because DEI centers around creating an inclusive and equitable experience for all employees. We fundamentally need that things, no matter who we are, the walks of life, like people are people, and we have to create an environment where people flourish,
Mhm.
right? And especially as you think about the nuance of having four generations in the workplace at the same time, like
Mhm.
Gen Zers' expectation of working very different than millennials, right? And Gen Zers, which by the way, I admire them so much. They have the voice and just the confidence that I never had. As I enter the workplace, like they will call it out and they will see to it that
Mhm.
their personal value alignment is aligned with that company, or else they'll walk. And
Yeah.
guess what? They can go DoorDash, Uber Eats, and do all these other kind of creative ways to generate income that I didn't want to have, right? It's like, oh, I got to stick in this corporate job.
Yeah.
So because of that, the generational changes and just people evolve every day, we can't get away from creating environments where people flourish.
Yeah.
That drives the end goal of meeting company goals, productivity, sales, goals. It's the impetus for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's I think that's the first thing that needs to be said. Number two, we love the media, but we know hype sells, right? And what it's done is it's really kind of taken this narrative around affirmative action and allowing people who, quite frankly, still don't quite understand DEI to put their spin
Mhm.
on what it is versus what it isn't, which can be very harmful, especially if you aren't a practitioner in this space. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, when people have influence, they can just say things and it can catch on. And that's what we're seeing. Fundamentally, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So the question becomes like, how do you actually deal with all of
Yeah.
this?
What do
How
you
do you
say? What do you do?
come to terms with it? And, for me, I was really, really nervous, to be honest. I was looking at the headlines. We saw Elon like fighting Mark Cuban. We saw like all the rest of this, and we're like, geez, like this is really taking
Look,
off.
even on the Elon thing, I wish I was good at memorizing statistics. Honest to goodness, no wonder he wants to say it's dead because Tesla has been sued so many times for racial discrimination and gender discrimination in the workplace. It ain't dead, buddy. You got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, yeah. And anyone that thinks it's a discriminatory practice in place is misinformed. The
Yes.
goal of DEI isn't to take away. The
Yes.
goal is to simply give people equal access to
Yeah.
contribute
Yep.
and help them individually based upon who they are and their experiences, lean in a way that's helpful to the
Yeah.
organization,
It's
recognizing
not a
how
finite pie. Like you
it's
don't have to
not.
give
It's
up
not.
something for someone to be included.
Yeah, yeah. But especially in North America, we've kind of been built on this perception of there always has to be a winner and a
No
loser.
loser.
You know, DEI very much is a counter argument that we can all win,
Mhm.
and it isn't in our DNA. And we have this internal like competition, right?
Yeah.
It's very counter to hey, we all can win and have a seat at the
Yeah.
table. So just something to point out. But for me personally, I actually needed to have a chat with my CEO
Okay.
about what was happening in the media. And I'm happy that I did because I wanted him to validate his perspective and his commitment level on DEI.
Mm.
It's interesting if you actually pull back the data. Ceramont, who is a well-known kind of DEI kind of consulting company that has a partnership with some of the top CEOs across all industries. Only 1% of companies have actually re-strategized or deprioritized DEI.
Huh.
So companies are very much moving forward with their goals that they
Mm.
set out. Again, media is creating the narrative, but the reality of it
Yeah.
is still moving forward because they understand the value and the business case for it. So I think we need to call that out.
Which begs to a question when you lift up the rugs of where this media is being written from and distributed by, who is it funded by? I don't
There
know.
you go. Yeah, well, that's definitely a question. But my CEO was like, I really see a lot of that is just noise. He
Yeah.
said, at the end of the day, like if I want to bring out the best in all of our employees, we want them to feel like they belong. And very much, he's like, we have woven DEI into not only our strategic memo to the company, our core objectives for next year, but we're going to make sure that we send a signal that inclusion and belonging is the cornerstone of just who we
Yeah.
are, right?
Yeah.
I think the other pieces I'm recognizing that because I'm hearing all of the media hype because I'm in that circle with chief diversity officers, employees very much are seeing a different picture, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Huh.
They're actually looking up at the environment to do a pulse check to validate that inclusion and belonging is still a part of their experience,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
which speaks to why it's so important, just in case, that amongst the external environment, internally, that most senior leader has to speak up and stand up as an executive sponsor and put the flag in the sand and going, this is us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
110%. And then you also have to have the proof points that like
Yeah.
validate for the individual that it very much is a part of the ecosystem. So
Mm.
if I'm having a conversation about my year end performance, is there a category around culture, inclusion, and belonging? Very much a signal that it's here. Do I see employee resource groups, having events or, doing things as a part of all hands, like very much, an example. Do I see my team leads, acknowledging, something really cool I brought to the table,
Yeah.
right? That's going to help nourish, an idea or an innovation, like very much I belong, right? So it's those things that are telling our internal employees if this work really is dead or if it's very much well and alive. So
So then I want to come back to you, Jill, and
yeah.
your identities and who you are. And when all this is going on around you, how do you find the motivation? I'm not sure if that's the right word, the resilience to ensure that you can still turn up every day.
Well, let's have an open and real conversation. There are days where we will second guess ourselves in the work that we are leading. It's a very heavy responsibility to shepherd, to be the voice of the voiceless, to look around the corners to make sure people know that you see them and leaders see them. And all of that can change, within a second, depending on the external landscape or life events that people are experiencing, or restructuring of organizations and new leaders coming in and layoffs. And like there is a lot, right? And it just changes all the time. So it's very heavy. And sometimes you will show up with doubt,
Yeah.
open and real. But for me, my silver line in all of this is one, ensuring that the work continues.
Mm.
I want people just to look up, and if they can identify one thing that feels them connected, their soul, their mission, their core
Mm.
values to the company, it is worth it. Number two, I know that we are creating a culture and, quite frankly, setting the precedents for generations to come. Like my work is much more than today, even though today is very important and my work is centered around today. But the more I can infuse inclusion into the process, into benefits, the employee experience, conversations, dialogue, the more it just becomes moving from unconscious bias to unconscious inclusion.
Mm.
And that will continue to feed ongoing cultures for years and years, right? When I
Wow.
look at my children, like
Yeah.
I want to be a part of a different type of corporate America, right?
Hopefully the ripple effect of what we had have is ongoing forever. I mean, it's the idealist in me, but that is my ideal. That,
Yeah.
you might change one person's life today, and then that person's career takes off because in the environment that you helped create more inclusive meant they got to earn more money. That meant to send their kids to college, and then their kids went and graduated, and they went and did something special in the world, and
And yes, so we are part of kind of that flywheel
yeah.
that will continue to feed the way people feel when they show up. And I think it's
Mm.
also important for CDOs and practitioners to also take care of themselves.
So, okay, I'm going to see if we can unpack this one. I don't have the answer. So I'm asking a question and we're going to see if we can address it. We have to work with stakeholders a lot of the time that perhaps aren't bought in.
Hmm.
And let's say they are consuming the content that DEI is dead. Affirmative action is discriminatory.
Hmm.
How do we have that difficult conversation with them? What should we be saying when they come to us and go, "Nah, I don't believe in affirmative action. It's reverse discrimination."
Yeah. So I think, what we have to recognize as DI practitioners, and we often feel that it is our responsibility to win all hearts and minds at that executive level and flip them into being a believer. I think what's interesting is I've been more successful when I've actually honored the window in which people sit in, or the window in which they see the world, right?
Mm,
Because DEI is also a concept that is meshed with how you have experienced the world around you,
very
right?
true.
Like their perspective has been built probably since, they were in elementary school, right?
Mhm.
And then the family structure and the beliefs, the attitudes, the behaviors, and then, college, right? Like, so the goal is, can I change, 50 plus years of experience and attitude and behavior, right?
I'm so with you on that. I often say, if you think you can put people in a room for 2 hours, run a training course, and think you can undo 50 years of your belief system, you're deluded. And that's why you need to move away from trying to shift beliefs. In fact,
Yeah.
it's actually not inclusive to try to shift beliefs because some of
Yeah.
those beliefs are rooted in religious beliefs as well. So I think I want to tie it back into what you're saying. Meet them at the window they're giving you. So I want you to take it from there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I've had more success in sitting back and learning about
Mm.
that person's viewpoint. It's not the end output, the hey, I think affirmative action is discriminatory. Like I'm learning who they are before they
Mm.
come to that conclusion. And
Yeah.
I think they feel seen by
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and a sense of belonging, that they actually can have that perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to judge and say if it's right or wrong. However, what I need to shift them to, after being empathetic and me learning and genuinely understanding who they are, right? Because they're the people that are leading folks. Like I really need to know who they are.
Yes.
Um, we then shift the perspective and translate their personal beliefs to the matter of facts of what our commitment is to the company.
So
And
good. Let's just let that land. Okay. Because the reason I want it to land so specifically is that's I often get asked, how do we rationalize people respecting someone's religious beliefs that might actually have beliefs that are discriminatory in themselves? In fact, that they don't believe in the inclusion of certain identities because of their religious beliefs. How do we navigate that? And I'm like, well, here's the thing: respect beliefs, but we have an organizational expectation for these behaviors.
that's where you tie it back, right? And I think
Perfect.
it's something powerful, and
Mm,
knowing that that person, because leaders are people. People
mm,
forget that when you get this leader sign, you get like this magic cape. Leaders are people, and oftentimes they are left behind in terms of their inclusion and belonging.
mhm.
And we know if you yourself, leader, no leader, don't feel connected, then you don't want to lean in and do
Mm,
all this work for other people because you just may not get it. It's a disconnect and it won't be authentic. So, I allow leaders to be who they are, bring themselves to the table, but then at the same time, navigate them to kind of our company wide commitment
mm.
and helping them understand how they actually drive the behaviors to get the output that we're looking for in terms of our company goals,
Yeah,
right? And that is where we have a lot. There's no misalignment there.
yeah.
There's no argument there. That buy-in is also tied, reinforced, and we're now accountable because
Mhm,
he himself is driving those behaviors and he does have that expectation of others. But we do have to recognize that there
mhm.
is a certain skill and competency that must be met to effectively drive this so that
Yeah,
all employees of all different walks of life can look up and say, I see myself in this work.
yeah. And and to sum that up, it is an organizational transformation. This isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't something that can sit off the side as a bolt in. This is something that needs to be woven through every part of that organization in how you make decisions, how you work, and everything in between. Jill, I don't want to say goodbye, but we have to say goodbye.
But we'll have a part two, right?
We will.
And
I think we'll do more than a part two. I think we will create a special offshoot season and we'll create a structure to it and then we'll do a different topic each week.
I love it. Let's do it. I'm all
Okay.
in.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to add your LinkedIn link at the in the description of the podcast so people can get in contact with you as well if they need.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Liz.
Thank you for your time.